You started your new business. Now, what are you going to call it? It's got to have a name. It's a pretty important part of your small business is what you call it. So let's talk about methodologies for choosing a name for your small business. We're going to talk about 5 main things. So this is Randy Kirk, Small Business Daily. And if you think this is good content, please hit the like button. Let's go on from there. What do you want to do with regard to creating this name? Well, believe it or not, in the 21st century, your company name needs to take into consideration SEO. This is especially true if you are a local small business. If you are basically serving consumers or businesses in your local community, it is very important to pay attention to the SEO of your brand. So, in a certain extent, the perfect SEO name for your restaurant would be Italian Restaurant in Los Angeles. Okay, that would be the perfect SEO name because that's how you're going to get found. Italian Restaurant in Los Angeles. You can't call your name Italian Restaurant near me, although that might be funny and maybe everybody get a kick out of it. So if you use that, let me know in the comments that you've decided to try that. But what you do want to do is do your biggest market, the market that you are, even if you're not located. Let's say for fun that you're on the borderline of Santa Monica and West LA, but you're actually in West LA. And let's say the stronger keyword is Santa Monica, but you're located in West LA. You could still say Italian Restaurant Santa Monica. That's just your name, okay? And that's going to help your SEO. Now, it's not just going to help your SEO when it comes to something like Google My Business, which is critical. It's the #1 most important place you can be highly ranked. It's going to help your SEO with regard to Yelp. It's going to help your SEO with regard to Google search in general. But where it's going to even be more important is going to be when you get your URL for your website. Your URL for your website should actually be even more keyword sensitive than the name of your business. But if your business is Italian Restaurant Riverside, then there you go. There's your URL, Italian Restaurant Riverside. And if it's taken, maybe it's Italian Restaurant _ Riverside, or it's Italian Restaurant in Riverside. So you can just vary it a little bit in order to get the right URL. So, and getting that URL keyworded properly is still extremely critical on the internet. So how can you vary that to make it more fun and more interesting? Well, that's the whole business of SEO is you've got to write for Google, and at the same time, you've got to write for the consumer. So you could say, we'll go back to the Italian restaurant. Go ahead and do some of the things you might have done years ago. Bob's Italian Restaurant, Riverside, or old-fashioned Italian restaurant, Riverside, or gourmet Italian restaurant. So you can add words. You just want to get those keywords in there as much as possible. And the keyword and the additional words can be anywhere in there. So it can be Italian Restaurant, Gourmet Foods of Riverside. It can be all kinds of ways of rearranging that brand, that name. So that's the first consideration is SEO. Your second consideration years ago would have been your first consideration. Who is the customer? Who is the consumer? What are they thinking about? What is it that's going to intrigue them and cause them to be more interested in what you're doing as opposed to what your competitor is doing? So cheap, or is that the market you're going after? Well, I had a company called Best Value Rent-A-Car. Best Value, it suggests inexpensive. We have Best Buy, it suggests inexpensive. We have Costco, our Price Club. These things suggest inexpensive. So you may, let's say, in my case, Best Value rental car of Riverside. So cheap rental cars of Riverside. Do you follow my gist? So what are you trying to do that's different? How are you niching yourself Maybe you want to do luxury real estate homes of Los Angeles. Maybe you want to do jumbo mortgage company of Old Iowa. So there's a lot of ways that you can potentially shift the branding, add words to the branding that's going to pay attention to the customer that you're looking for, the way you're niching yourselves. So that would be the number 2 thing that you want to pay attention to. Sometimes you're going to figure that principle of attracting the customer is more important than the SEO. And truly, on Google My Business right now, you can add 1 or 2 words to the title you use on Google My Business that aren't in your official name. Okay, so if you want to be Northern Italian Restaurant and you don't want to say in Riverside, you can on Google My Business add in Riverside, and they're going to accept that. That's today. Could they change the rules? Of course they could. But at least for now, you can add that 1 word without having any problem with Google My Business. The number 3 thing is related to the number 2 thing, but you want to think about emotional content, okay? So how can you create the emotional desire to want to come over and see you versus somebody else? Now, that emotional desire might be associated with a brand. We're very emotional about brands. So I've been in the bicycle business my whole life, and there's always been this argument about whether you should be Bob's Schwinn or Joe's Trek, as opposed to just your own brand, but adding the brand that is your primary business brand. So the argument against is you put that brand in there, and all of a sudden you lose that line. Now you've got to rename the business. And that's not a good thing. So you want to take into consideration all those elements, but putting in the brand of your most important line in your name can be a very big emotive way to draw clients in. You can use other emotional words. Again, we talked about a minute ago about whether you're a luxury brand, which is emotional, or whether you're the cheapest guy in town. These are all ways to induce emotional responses. A great example would be fun zone. Okay, fun. Immediately, you've got this idea in fun zone, you can visualize it. So, but if I was going to do fun zone, I would probably be fun zone amusement park of Anaheim or something like that. So you're trying to come up with ways to brand yourself, to identify yourself, to create emotion, to think about your customer, and also to keep it in this Google search friendly approach. So what's next? The next thing you want to think about is how the brand is going to affect your logo. I always want to create a logo for my company that looks fine in black and white. Yes, it's true. Almost everything you do today can be in color for either cheap or free, but you're going to find situations where it's impossible to be in color or where the expense of putting it in color is going to be too much. So how will my logo look in black and white? And how will my logo look overall based on my brand? So if my brand has got 5 words in it, like many of the ones I've just suggested to you, that becomes a fairly complicated logo, but there's ways to do that. Maybe your logo only includes Fun Zone, and then in Riverside or something becomes something at the bottom. Or Amusement Park Riverside becomes little tiny letters at the bottom that doesn't even always show. Sometimes you're only showing the Fun Zone part. I'm not picking on Fun Zone. Okay, it could be anything. Italian restaurant. It could be Sicilian restaurant. Whatever it is, you want to contemplate how this is going to affect your logo. Your logo is probably going to be with you forever. Nobody ever changes their logos. 20, 30, 40 years, I've seen companies keep the same logo, even though the logo is old-fashioned, shouldn't work anymore. It's really hard to get people to change their logo. So think hard about how the name is going to look from a graphic arts standpoint, in your logo and in the design. Some things work a lot better than other things, and one name might be just a lot better than another name when it comes to your logo. Okay, 5 and last, picking this final decision about your name. You want to get a focus group together. Now, I don't mean you're going to go out and pay $100 a person to come in and get 7 people to sit around a room and kick the name around. Okay, you're going to get an informal focus group. So one way to do this is to get 7 or 10 or 15 of your friends online. I think this is a great way to do it. And you start sending out lists of names to these individuals, and they just say absolutely not to the ones that are absolutely not. And then they give you your top 3. If you're sending 10 names, top 3, bottom 3, something like that. You get 10, 12, 15, 20 people to respond back to you with regard to the branding that you're thinking about. And then maybe out of that, you don't like any of them. So now maybe you get a Zoom meeting together with these same 10 people and say, well, you know what? We were down to these 3, but we don't like any of them. Let's brainstorm about it. Maybe all 10 can't show up. Maybe you only have 3 people. 4 people can brainstorm. Use your resources like that. It is absolutely amazing that your peers or even people that have never owned a business in their life are a fantastic resource for naming products. We used to use our employees when I had a larger company. We get the employees all involved in naming any new product or any new company that we were starting. So contemplate getting a group together that can help you sort out all of your ideas and or brainstorm. Another way to do what I just said is to start with the brainstorming session. So you can get those 10 people together in that Zoom meeting or over at your house for beers or whatever you do, and sit around and brainstorm about names. This is another methodology that you can use. Now, in relationship to that, one of the ways to start is just to go online under your category in various cities and start looking for brands that other people have tried. Don't use your own city because you're not going to want to copy people in your own neighborhood, but go to Miami and New York and Chicago and St. Louis and Alabama and look up Italian restaurants and then see what people have done with the names that they've come up with, and then also see what they're doing with logos, and you might get a lot of great ideas. One of the most important principles of marketing is copying from people that have come before you. There's no use reinventing things when there's lots of good examples of ways that things have been marketed in the past. So that's all we've got for you today. If that was useful for you, please like it, subscribe, and then look for the notification button there so we can notify you of what we're going to talk about tomorrow. This is Randy Kirk at Small Business Daily. See you tomorrow.